What's up guys, my name is Ace, and Season 1 for Black Ops 6 is finally here, and with this, we saw a good handful of weapon balancing as well as a bunch of other adjustments to multiplayer, and in today's video, we're just going to be focusing on the weapon balancing section, and I do plan on covering the other changes like the buff to the ninja perk as well as nerf to the default footstep audio in a separate video, simply because this is going to be a big enough video as is just looking at the weapon balancing in great detail like I always do. But without further ado, let's dive into the weapon balancing, and we're going to start this off with assault rifles. For many of them, they've basically just adjusted them so they now have a solid one-hit kill potential in hardcore game modes, without really impacting much, if anything at all, for core game modes. So with the XM4, for instance, in hardcore game modes, we now have a one-shot kill potential to the body at just over 40 meters, which is very impressive. This is now going to be a very solid gun in hardcore modes, whereas previously it kind of sucked. But then when we look at this in core game modes, it doesn't change the number of shots to kill to the body at all. And while they did adjust our base headshot multiplier and CHF headshot multiplier to compensate for the fact that they slightly boosted our base damage, everything here is going to be the same aside from in the minimum damage range, so long ranges. With the CHF barrel, instead of requiring 3 headshots to cut that down to a 5-shot kill, you now only need 2 headshots. So very, very minor buff there, but for the most part, this is just going to perform exactly the same in core game modes. It's a very similar story with the AMES 85. In hardcore game modes, we now have a really impressive one-shot kill potential at over 50 meters. So again, this went from being a pretty bad gun in hardcore to one of the better guns in hardcore game modes. Whereas for core, again, they dropped the headshot multipliers a little bit to compensate, and this only impacted our minimum damage range headshots for both base headshots as well as the CHF barrel. So with base headshots at long range, you now need 3 base headshots mixed in with body shots to cut that down to a 5-shot kill, whereas previously in that range, it was impossible to get a 5-shot kill without the CHF barrel. And speaking of that CHF barrel, it used to require 3 headshots in that range. Now it only takes 2. Now, the final assault rifle that got a similar adjustment here is the GPR-91. This one now has a roughly 46 meter one-shot kill potential to the body in hardcore, whereas previously there was no one-shot potential to the body in hardcore. Although it is worth noting, in the minimum damage range, we did sacrifice our one-shot potential to the head. Previously, we could one-shot them to the head, whereas now we can't, and this is due to the fact that they once again dropped those headshot multipliers to compensate. And in core game modes, the only thing this affects is the CHF barrel in the minimum damage range. It requires 2 headshots rather than 3. Now, unlike the others, the GPR-91 got a few additional buffs on top of this. When it comes to our sprint out time and our tactical sprint out time, they were just very slightly improved, just by 5 milliseconds. Realistically, you're not going to notice this in game. However, our slide to fire and dive to fire times were also improved noticeably. And this is interesting because all of the other assault rifles have the same slide to fire and dive to fire times, but the GPR-91 is now an exception. And this is designed to really push this as that SMG assault rifle hybrid. Now, one last assault rifle that saw an adjustment with this update is the Goblin MK2. They didn't change any of the damage values or anything. They very slightly improved our sprint out times, again, just by 5 milliseconds in both cases, which you're not likely to ever notice in the game. And they also boosted all of our movement speed values by 0.01 meters per second, which again, realistically, you're probably not going to notice any difference here whatsoever. As for SMGs, only one of the SMGs was touched here, and this was the Kompact 92. And what they did here is they very slightly reduced our minimum damage value while very slightly increasing our headshot multiplier from 1.05 up to 1.1. What this means is in hardcore game modes, in the maximum damage range, we can now kill in 1 shot to the head within that range, but still not a 1-shot kill to the body. However, there was actually a bit of a nerf to hardcore here as well. Since they dropped that damage value, it now drops off to a 3-shot kill in hardcore game modes in its minimum damage range, whereas previously it was still a 2-shot kill. And that's not something you see too often in hardcore modes. Typically, at most, a gun will take 2 shots to kill in hardcore. After that, let's get into the shotgun category, and the first thing is they made a couple shotgun-specific attachment adjustments. So with the Strelic laser, they increased the time it takes to reach your aim down sight spread from 20% of your aim down sight speed to 70% of your aim down sight speed. So that was actually a nerf to this attachment. It takes a bit longer before you get that tightened spread with this. And then with the Slug attachment, we saw several adjustments here, and we'll go into the guns individually. When it comes to the Marine SP, previously we couldn't get a 1-shot kill with the Slugs, at least after the most recent update leading up to this. Whereas now we have a guaranteed 1-shot out to 2 meters and a 1-shot kill potential to the body out to 12.7 meters, but you have to hit them in the upper torso or upper arm in order to make that happen, or head of course. And speaking of head, we can get a 1-shot kill to the head in the next damage range as well, which extends out to about 25 meters. So definitely significantly better than it was pre-patch when it comes to these damage ranges. However, when using the Slug, we also saw a little bit of a nerf to hipfire. And as we can see here, the circles are showing how big the hipfire spread was pre-patch, whereas those little hipfire indicator marks, those are the spread values you see post-patch. So you can see this is just a slight nerf to this. It's going to make it a little bit harder to hipfire with slugs, as it should be fairly difficult. You should be having to aim down sight with that more often than not. Then with the ASG-89 with slugs, we saw similar adjustments here. So when it comes to our damage values, they're significantly better post-patch compared to pre-patch. We have an extremely short guaranteed one-shot kill at just 1.3 meters. You have to be practically touching the enemy for that to happen. However, we can get a one-shot kill to the head out to about 15 meters, which is not bad for a shotgun like this. Additionally, our guaranteed two-shot is way better now at just over 20 meters, so more often than not, you should be expecting a two-shot kill with this when using slugs, and that's not bad at all. And then it's worth noting, in the minimum damage range, it no longer drops off to a 5-shot kill. At most, it's going to take 4 shots to kill with slugs. Then when it comes to hipfire, we saw very similar adjustments to what we saw with the Marine SP using slugs. As you can see here, all of our hipfire values are just a little bit worse than pre-patch, so it's not going to be as effective when using slugs and hipfiring. And now we can get into the marksman rifle category, and the 2 burst guns saw some adjustments. But before we do that, just a quick note, if you guys like this level of detail that I go into with my weapon balancing, I do this for every weapon balancing adjustment throughout the entire year. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so you don't miss out on these details. So with the SWAT 556, we actually saw some handling buffs. So our aim down sight time is very noticeably improved, whereas our sprint out times are slightly improved by just 10 milliseconds in both cases. Then on top of that, when using rapid fire specifically, they increased the recoil penalties, so they made the recoil a little bit worse when you're using rapid fire. And taking a look at it pre-patch versus post-patch, honestly, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference at all here with the SWAT 556. Technically, it'll be slightly less accurate. Perhaps you'll see slightly fewer one-burst kills with this when using rapid fire, but at the end of the day, it's still quite an accurate gun with this attachment on. As for the other burst marksman rifle, the AEK-973, this one saw some nerfs to the base gun, so our sprint out time and tactical sprint out time, these values were harmed by 10 milliseconds, so a little bit slower in that case. Then they directly harmed our time to kill potential with this if you're using the rapid fire attachment. The first thing they did is they reduced the rate of fire bonus that you get with rapid fire. This is the rate of fire within your burst. The bonus was 10%, that's been cut down to 5%. And that just has an extremely minor impact on our one burst time to kill potential. It's still insanely fast at 130 milliseconds though. The bigger nerf to this was to our burst delay. They absolutely destroyed rapid fire on this gun when it comes to our burst delay. Previously, our burst delay was just 115 milliseconds. Now it's 295 milliseconds, so significantly slower. And what this means is if you don't get that one burst kill and you start to get in the 4-shot kill potential, our time to kill went from 301 milliseconds all the way up to 490 milliseconds. That is a massive nerf to this gun with rapid fire equipped, which is a little bit unfortunate. Yes, it definitely needed an adjustment. Rapid fire was way too powerful on this gun pre-patch, but I can't help but think they took this a little bit too far, and you can really see the rate of fire difference when we also look at the recoil nerf that applied to rapid fire specifically on this. I'm gonna let these clips play out without my voice behind them so you can really have a listen to the sound of the gun and how much that rate of fire and burst delay has changed when using rapid fire. So as you can probably tell, this is like a totally different gun now with this attachment equipped. And then on top of this, you can see that there was just a little bit more recoil now post-patch compared to pre-patch when using rapid fire on the AEK-973. But again, at the end of the day, still very accurate. And this just leaves us with the sniper rifle category when it comes to weapon adjustments, and they made quite a few general changes to sniper rifles. The first thing is we saw a 17% improvement across the board to our flinch resistance when using a sniper rifle. And taking a look at it pre-patch versus post-patch with no attachments equipped, you can see that's definitely a nice improvement to flinch. It's going to be a bit easier to stay on target when being shot. However, in order to compensate to this to a degree, they actually slightly nerfed our flinch resistance stocks, like the heavy stock for instance. So you'll still see a net improvement with these, but not to as large of a degree as we saw with the base sniper rifles. And that's just to make sure those flinch resistance attachments didn't give you too much flinch resistance overall. And then on top of this, for general sniper adjustments, all snipers will have 1 second of 50% idle sway at the beginning of aiming down sight. And this also means when you initially aim down sight, you're going to be at least closer to that point of aim, and it will deviate less than it did pre-patch. There will still be some amount of deviation there, but you can see looking at it post-patch after watching the pre-patch footage, every time I aim down sight, I'm much closer to the center of that bell that I'm aiming at without being perfectly centered every single time. Overall though, this should make a very noticeable improvement for you quickscopers out there. Next, let's get into the individual sniper adjustments, because they all saw some slight adjustments here as well. With the Frostline, we actually saw the most amount of buffs here. Our aim down sight time was improved quite nicely, down to 535 milliseconds. Then both of our sprint out time values were also noticeably improved, especially when it comes to that tactical sprint out. That's a 20 millisecond improvement, which is noticeable. And then finally, for the base gun at least, our aim down sight idle sway overall was improved by 10%. And looking at it pre-patch, you can see our sway is often going very noticeably outside of that bell that I'm aiming at. Whereas when we take a look at post-patch, you can see I'm staying on that bell a lot more. It will still sometimes come off of that, but this is absolutely noticeably better post-patch compared to pre-patch. Now on top of this, for attachments, we see the same trend with all of the sniper rifles. They buffed the infiltrator stock, so our aim walking movement speed has increased. The CHF barrel had its recoil values reduced, and with the combat stock attachments, they also improved our aim walking movement speed. And like I said, that applies to all of the sniper rifles to slightly varying degrees. Next, let's look at the SVD specific adjustments. The first thing they did here is they targeted shot queuing a little bit. And that means if you accidentally pull the trigger an additional time immediately after firing what you intended to be your final shot, then it would queue up the next shot and it would fire an additional shot that you didn't mean to fire. They have adjusted the thresholds on that, so it shouldn't be happening quite as often as it was pre-patch. On top of that, they very slightly improved our sprint to fire values by just 10 milliseconds. Again, 10 milliseconds you're probably not going to notice in game. And finally, this just leaves us with the LR762. And with this one, they just targeted our tactical sprint out time and they reduced that value by 10 milliseconds. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for all of the weapon-specific balancing adjustments that took place for Black Ops 6 multiplayer with the Season 1 update. Like I said, there were a bunch of other adjustments that they made with this, including a buff to the ninja perk and an adjustment to default footstep audio. And like I said, I'm going to make a separate video on that just so I can cover that in the detail that it really deserves. And I'll aim to have that one out for tomorrow. So again, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now would be a great time to do so you don't miss out on the details of any of these updates. And with that, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. And I'm very curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the weapon balancing that took place with the Season 1 update? Do you guys think these were all generally good changes, or maybe not so much? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.